Hey, this is Lessons with Cameron. Thanks for tuning in. So you want to play guitar. First thing you're going to need to do is figure out, what is this thing? I've got some of my favorite guitars here with me today. I've got a Minarik Medusa Custom, I've got a Gibson USA Les Paul, and a American Standard Fender Telecaster. I'm playing through an orange Tiny Terror with a few handful of pedals down at the bottom, but what we're talking about today is not these guys, but your first guitar. It should look something a little more ridiculous, or less, than this. And this is the guitar I picked up in high school. It's almost my first guitar. It's the only one I still have left, the old ones. Let's go ahead and take a look at what makes this thing what it is. This particular guy has two pickups here. These pickups are used to pick up the sound, transmit it out to the output, which is over here, and send it off to the amp to be turned back into sound. Now, this pickup sounds a little different than this pickup, which is why you're going to want to use your pickup selector switch to kind of color the tone to fit what you're looking for. So, what we find is when you're on the lowest setting here, that'll be your bridge pickup. The bridge pickup is a lot hotter, meaning that it bites a lot harder. It's not a real great sound for clean channel, but it sounds really good with distortion. When you get over here, you switch the switch all the way the other way, and now you're on what's called the neck pickup. The neck pickup's a little warmer, good for clean tones, kind of muddy for distortion. It's up to you. If you're looking for a muddy distortion, you'll find it there. If you have only two pickups, the center switch turns them both on and gives you kind of a middle-of-the-road sound. So this is the sound of the bridge pickup. Now the bridge pickup sounds a little sharp. This guitar doesn't have a whole lot in the way of tone, so this one isn't hurting your ears. I'm going to go to a mix of the two, where it gets a little bit warmer. It's kind of nice for a clean channel. Might be too much sometimes if you want it to be dull or darker. This is the neck pickup, always going to give you the warmest sound. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and make these same comparisons, adding some distortion. So that was our bridge pickup. It's going to be your kind of most biting pickup. The best one, in my opinion, for distortion. If you want clarity, if you're looking for a little more fuzz, start dialing your pickup switch back and blending it out. So here's the same setting, just with the middle pickup selected. So I've got both of these guys going at the same time. And we go to the last one, which is the neck pickup, our warmest and fuzziest. About the knobs. There's a bunch of different knobs on a bunch of different guitars, and it's all pretty much going to come down to what kind of options or how it's wired. In this one, I've got the two pickups here, and then I've got one volume knob and one tone knob. The volume knob is pretty obvious. It makes it louder and quieter, whereas the tone knob just kind of rolls on and off the high frequencies, making it sound more dull, as if you dropped your amp into a cardboard box or a bucket of water. This is taking the tone all the way off and all the way on, somewhere in between. Personally, I just run mine at the top because I like a lot of that bite. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the parts of the guitar specifically. We're going to talk about the bridge, the pickups, the nut, and the tuners. So this one here is called a floating bridge, and it actually just kind of pivots on these two screws. It's really good for essentially doing big dive bombs and all that kind of stuff. It's really ineffective at keeping the guitar in tune if you don't stay totally on top of it. And the way we do that is typically here with what's called a locking nut. You can see that I've already lost and misplaced or otherwise thrown away all of my locks for my locking nut, because when these guys are in place, you need a wrench to change a string, you need a wrench to do anything. So I don't care for these, though I know they're really popular. The thing about these dive bars, though, is the whammy bar is not that useful until you really kind of get your hands on the guitar and kind of get your mind wrapped around it. So I don't endorse it for a beginner guitar. The other kinds of bridges, what we have here on this Les Paul is a stop tailpiece bridge. And this is extremely popular with American-made Gibsons and a lot of custom lines. What you have here is a piece that just sits on a couple posts, and you have adjustable nuts here, which is great for setting your intonation. And then you have a second piece here that's just anchored on these two large bolts, and this thing keeps this in great tune. Over here we've got a plastic nut, which is basically fairly common for a reasonable guitar. The guitar, basically anything you're getting off a factory line is probably going to have a plastic nut. The other thing I want to talk about is these tuners. And tuners are very important. If they are bad tuners, they won't stay in tune. If your guitar goes out of tune, you're going to sound terrible no matter how good you are. These are ping tuners. They actually worked out pretty good. They've taken reasonable care of that guitar, but at the same time, the floating bridge kills it. These are Gibson Deluxe, or no, these are Kluson Deluxes, excuse me. These are, so far, have been just real handy for me. This is the Minarik Medusa. This is my custom here, and this guy has a bone nut. So this here has been made out of some kind of bone. I'm not sure what, but that's what it is. That gives it kind of that yellowish color there too. A little bit different than the binding, which is this stuff around the sides and outsides. Binding's totally cosmetic. It's great if you have it. It's not necessary. I've got the tuners here. These are fascinating tuners. These are some Grover tuners. They're pretty standard in terms of how things go. They've got very large 3-step keys that are made from soapstone. They're actually feel real nice on the hand. But the reason these are kind of special is the diameter of the post here, which is the part sticking up through the guitar. The diameter of the post is really large, meaning I can get very small turns without having to actually go back and forth. So when you get caught on, you're just 1 cent off of that note, it's really easy to get back. This would be the last of the group that I have here with us. This one is, we've got basically what we call a hardtail. On the back of the guitar you can see 6 holes here. These 6 holes actually happen to have the strings going directly in them. So the strings go straight through the body of the guitar, come out the front, get strung up here through a plastic nut, pretty much very standard, and then you've got the Fender tuners back here that have been, for me, pretty reliable. I've owned a few Fenders, never had a problem with any of these tuners. Though I've seen some of the lesser expensive Fenders, their tuners can be a little less reliable. So as we go back to the pickups, you'll notice that this one has specifically different set of pickups than the others. All 3 of the other guitars here today have the same style of pickup called a humbucker, and it looks like 2 pickups squished together. And that would have been this guy here. So the other 2, my custom here and this Les Paul, both also sport the same kind of pickups, but they're both wearing what we call pickup covers. The pickup cover is essentially just a these ones here, chrome covers that are soldered onto place and just make the whole thing look a little bit nice. First thing I'm going to do is do a general comparison to show you the difference between the humbuckers and the single coils. So this is, I'm going to go into the middle pickup here. This is your standard Gibson Les Paul with a big fat humbucker. Now this is the traditional model, so it's got classic 57 pickups, meaning that it's got kind of a vintagey feel and vintagey sound to it. But this is the big beefy sound that you're going to be looking for out of a humbucker. The difference between one of these guys and a single coil is pretty dramatic. So when you're choosing a guitar, you really want to think, what kind of pickups do I need for the kind of music I'm doing? Different kinds of music, different kinds of sounds, I should say, because really you can use any sound on anything, but different kinds of sounds are going to suit different players, so you want to make sure you find the sound that fits you. And this is what we get with the difference on the single coil. This is our front single coil. In the middle pickup here, or in the middle selection, we've got both pickups going. And then when we go to the lipstick pickup, this is my personal favorite setting for the Tele. You don't want to get something a little too soft. Doesn't have the stubble that you're looking for. If you're in a death metal band, you're going to want to get something a little bit heavier. If you're playing in a blues band, you don't need a really fast guitar necessarily that's going to let you play all these fast arpeggios, because it just doesn't feel like it belongs. So you want to get the sound you're looking for. Alright, so now we're going to talk about necks. Necks are one of the more overlooked and more important parts of the guitar. Now, there's a lot of different kinds and a lot of different ways it comes together, and it winds up mostly being about two things, which is sound transfer and comfort. For this particular setup, this is what we call a bolt-on neck. Pretty much all Fenders except the custom shop Fenders are going to have a bolt-on neck. The other kinds of necks I'm going to show you here in a second. On the front of the guitar, you'll find a bunch of dots on the majority, I would say, of guitars. And in this case, you've got dots on the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, 12th, 15th, 17th, 19th, and 21st frets. That's something you're going to want to memorize over time, but right now, we call these dots inlays because they're actually laid into the neck to give you a good set of position markers. Now on the side of the neck, you've got matching dots. This helps out so that you can really tell what's going on. So here's your telltale giveaway for a bolt-on. This is called the heel, where this body kind of gets heeled off here. And you can see it's two different kinds of wood, and there's a bunch of screws here. Now the next kind of neck is what's called a set neck, and this is what you're going to find on almost every Gibson guitar. This is one of the primary differences between Gibsons and Fenders. So this is a set neck, meaning that you've got a piece of wood here that's been cut separately from the body and then actually glued into place with a bunch of kind of teeth that interconnect through in here. Set necks are absolutely wonderful for transferring sound because it's wood to wood with nothing but a thin layer of glue between it, which is a little less stable than, say, I don't know, bolts. So the glue can be a weak point in the guitar, so you have to kind of be careful with your Gibson necks. But for the most part, you're going to get a great sound transfer. That's part of the reason Gibson has such a great sound. The last one here, this is the custom. And so this has a little extra bunches and bunches of things. This particular guitar, on the back, if you look real closely, you'll see that the wood actually goes all the way through. This is what we call a neck-through guitar, because the neck goes through the body, as opposed to being glued on like the Gibson or bolted on like the Fender. This is the best possible transfer of sound because you can't transfer sound any better than one piece of wood. So here we are, we're going to go ahead and talk about the one last thing I didn't talk about yet, which is the truss rod. This right here is what we call a bell cover typically, and this is a cover bolted onto the top of the neck that's going to cover what's referred to as the truss rod. Now, the Gibson has a bell cover on it. This particular custom has a bell cover on it. Doesn't mean much, looks real snazzy, but all it's really doing is covering a gaping little hole that Fender went ahead and left for us. So right here, we've got this open truss rod. Now the truss rod is a steel rod, runs through the neck and allows us to adjust the curvature of the neck to flatten it out or to bow it or convex, concave, however you need it to go, so the neck itself is level. It's not something you want to mess with until you really, really know. Leave that to trained professionals. You can make or break your guitar that way. More importantly, break. Alright, so now we're going to go over 5 different things about the guitar specifically that you want to look for when you're buying a guitar. Things you want to be on top of. The first thing is going to be tone. The sound of the instrument is going to be really dependent upon your ears and your tastes. So if you like the way it sounds, that's step 1. Basically, use your ears. If you hear something that you like, that's your guitar. If you don't, move on to another guitar. You can change pickups out all day long. You could do a lot of hop-ups and mods to your guitar, but really, you really just want to play. So try to find one that sounds pretty good out of the box. You can make up for it with pedals and amps, but only to so much of a degree. You want to try to get the best thing you can afford, but most importantly, you want to get something that you enjoy to play. The next one I want to talk about is feel. When you put the guitar in your lap, How does it feel? Is it comfortable? Do you have to reach and stretch? Is the bottom of the neck accessible? Is the top of the neck accessible? Do you feel like you're going to be here? If you do, make sure that this cutaway is nice and good. Now the Les Pauls have a big cutaway. It's real good for getting your hand in. Things like this Medusa here, the cutaway gets a little narrow at the top. So if you're shredding in this top 22 fret area, you're going to get your hand a little stuck from time to time. It's not too bad, but every once in a while I do find a little confined up there. Got a nice big exaggerated cutaway on the Telecaster as well. That's this guy here. You can see it's pretty similar to the one on the Gibson. So you've got the feel of the instrument. The neck is going to be different on every guitar. This is another one I want to talk about. In terms of feel, when you grab the neck, you should be able to get your hand pretty much around it and be able to grab the whole thing. Different necks are going to have different thicknesses, and they're going to have different kinds of cuts. Some are in V's, some are round, some come out and flatten out in the back, some have a real pointy back, some have a real flat back. You just got to find the one that fits your hand, because everybody's hand's different, and that's why they give us so many different necks to work with. The next one I want to talk about is weight, because this one matters. The weight of the guitar winds up determining how long you can handle playing it, be it standing up. Sometimes sitting down is good, but you got to watch your leg. If you're sitting for a couple hours and you haven't moved, you might find your leg falling asleep. Some guitars, heavier ones, the Les Pauls are pretty heavy, but the way they're cut back here, pretty much they've got a nice thin waist. They sit on your lap real good. They don't give too much trouble until you're standing up for a couple hours playing a show or something. In those circumstances, that's when the weight might get to you. This particular one, the traditional, actually has been what they call weight relieved. They drilled out a couple ounces from the inside to try to make the traditionally heavy Les Paul a little bit lighter. Next thing I want to talk about in terms of the 5 steps, we've got tone, we've got feel. I want to talk about the action of the guitar. The action is how high the strings are up off the neck and how kind of easy it is to play overall the instrument. When you're looking at the action, you want to kind of take a gander at the distance between the frets here and between the string. Just see if how far you're going to have to go. The farther you have to go, the harder it is to play the guitar, but you do get some sonic benefits out of having a higher action, usually coupled with heavier strings. But as you're initially starting out, you're probably just going to go with the basic string size set. It's going to fit your hand without causing too much pain. The next one I want to talk about is quality. The quality of the instrument's kind of hard to tell at first, so you're going to want to read a lot of reviews about the guitar you're actually looking at, then go play a couple. Try to find a few. When you're playing them, you want to look over for general signs of construction neglect or places where they might have cut some corners, because if there's cut corners on the outside of the guitar, there's a real good chance there's a lot of cut corners on the inside, and the quality matters. Now, part of that build quality is knowing what kind of wood is in the guitar and how that matters. Heavier woods are going to produce a bigger sound. So with lighter woods, in this particular case, this guitar is plywood. So it's got some weight to it, but that's because there's glue. All these other guys are made from different kinds or different grades of wood, from maple to mahogany to ash. The heavier the guitar, the better the tone. So unfortunately, all 3 of these guys are pretty heavy, whereas this guy's not so bad. Some of the lighter guitars, the hollow body guitars, which give you a different sound overall because they have kind of an acoustic feel to them, but they don't sound like an acoustic guitar. It's just a bigger more body in the sound. It's real good for jazz, real good for country, and real good for a couple other places. Or if you want to do rockabilly, they also produce a pretty good sound. So all in all, you want to make sure that you've got a good tone that you can live with. A nice, at least, bass tone, because as you pick out the different amplifiers, you're going to be shaping your tone better. So the core of your tone really is what comes out of that guitar. So we've got the tone. The action, you want to make sure it's playable, that it doesn't hurt your hands to push those strings down. You can get your hand around the neck. The feel, if it's comfortable, you'll spend more time on it. If it's uncomfortable, you might not. Quality, weight, and action. You want to make sure you have all these things in place, at least to your standards. Now, as a beginner, you just have to use your best judgment. But the good news is you should be able to tell pretty instantly if a guitar feels cheap. If it's too cheap, move on. If you get too cheap of an instrument, you'll regret it, and you'll have to buy an instrument twice as expensive as soon as you figure out that what you bought isn't an instrument at all, but a really fancy toy. So some will argue one guitar is better than another, and I can only argue that all guitars are different. You just got to find the one that fits your style. All right, make sure you come back and check on our channel and see what we got coming up. We're going to be looking at guitars, we're going to be looking at pedal boards, we're going to be looking at amplifiers, and we're going to go ahead and go a little deeper into some of the basics of music in general and get people kind of educated so they walk in the guitar store knowing what they're talking about. Also, make sure that you check us out at lessonswithcameron.com or here at YouTube at Lessons with Cameron. Thanks.